Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
And welcome, everybody. Hands-On Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo. It's great to be with you today to jump into this thing we call, the dojo, where we learn how to explain, defend the faith with clarity, charity, and confidence. And where I used to say, and it's still true, that catechesis is where the rubber of catechesis meets, apologetics is where the rubber of catechesis meets the road of everyday life. And so it's incredibly great to be with you, and it's going to be a great program indeed, because we're going to have a really fascinating discussion on the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And to help us with that discussion, we have our good friends Arthur and Theresa Beem coming on. We're going to talk about a doctrine that actually many Seventh-day Adventists themselves aren't aware of, even though it's one of the pillars of their church, namely the sanctuary doctrine. And so in a sense, you'll be up on this and be able to discuss it with your Seventh-day Adventist friends, maybe able to tell them a little bit about what their group believes. So as you know, they're converts. Arthur and Theresa are converts to the Catholic faith, and they do lots of great ministry. They're just a lot of fun to talk to. So they'll be coming up on the other side of the break. In the meantime, we're going to have our Finding the Fallacy segment, which today's fallacy, by the way, is the inflation of conflict. And also, we're going to meet an early church father who is Hermes, the shepherd of Hermes. So very, very early church father. One I don't think most people are familiar with. So we're going to learn a lot of new things today. Let's see. Before I begin, want to give my shout out to all of you watching live stream on Facebook and YouTube. Hello, everybody. Welcome aboard. And I want to welcome all of you listening via radio around the country and also via podcast. It's great to have you aboard. And by the way, you're probably thinking, podcast? I didn't know you can get this program on podcast, on YouTube or whatever. All you have to do is either download our handy-dandy phone app, or you can go to our flagship website, which is virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Click on our shows and scroll down, and there you have it. You have all our shows, and you can share it. You can do all sorts of cool things with it, and evangelize, because even though many of us are stationed in place, we could do apologetics in place by sharing this program with others. Tell people about it. Maybe you know somebody that would be interested in the topic, so you might want to mention the show. Also, a really great way to evangelize. It won't cost you anything. In fact, you could do it right now in the comfort of your home if you're watching live stream, is subscribe. If you haven't subscribed to the program, go to the Hands-On Apologetics channel and click on subscribe, hit thumbs up, do whatever, smash those buttons, if you will. And that helps with evangelism, too, because that helps with our show's visibility and just making it more widely known. So it doesn't cost you anything. It's just a couple of clicks of the button, and we truly appreciate it here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. So I want to thank everybody who has done it, and I want to thank all of you who are about to do it in advance. Thanks very much. By the way, if you have any questions for Arthur or Theresa Beem, you can give us a call toll-free at 888-526-2151. That is 888-526-2151. Or you can email us at questions@handsonapologetics.com, and that goes straight to the dojo. That's the official dojo mailbox. And I do answer the emails, and I want to thank you guys. I got some very interesting questions, too, in the dojo mailbox. All right, without further ado, why don't we jump into our segments, beginning with the Finding the Fallacy segment. For those who are new to the show, Every episode, we go through an informal fallacy and kind of explain it. That helps us sharpen our critical thinking skills. And on Fridays, we often look at a propaganda technique just to change things up. So since today is Monday, we're going to look at finding the fallacy, which is the fallacy of inflation of conflict. Now, what is this fallacy? Well, the fallacy of inflation of conflict assumes the belief that the instances where scholars or scientists have differing opinions on something, that it calls into credibility an entire field into question. So, for example, someone could say, well, scientists are divided on one particular issue. Well, then science is really no use whatsoever, right? So to disqualify an entire field because there's not agreement on particular issues. This is done an awful lot also in theology and apologetics, that you may have historians who might differ on a point. And so therefore, hey, let's throw history out the window. It's of no value whatsoever. Or something else. And of course, that is more or less just a way to burn sources that otherwise would be uncomfortable. But, there could be disagreements. But nevertheless, the field itself, its methodology could be sound. It just be, maybe it's misapplied or it's missing information that it needs. So that's our finding the fallacy for today, the inflation of conflict fallacy. Why don't we move to the early church father? And his name is Hermes, who flourished sometime around AD 140, 155. From the Muratorian fragment is responsible for the information that Hermes, the author of the Shepherd of Hermes, was the brother of Pope St. Pius I, who reigned from AD 140 to 155. From the Shepherd itself, there are a few items of curious information revealed about who Hermes was. And by the way, this comes from Jurgen's Faith of the Early Church Fathers. Jurgen says that what we learn from the Shepherd of Hermes, that Hermes was a slave and afterwards a freeman. He had a farm on a highway between Rome and Cumae, but he lost his business in reverses. His children apostatized and betrayed him in the persecutions. And his wife had an unbridled tongue and was generally shrewish. Shrewish. Say that 3 times quick. In fact, we know many quite little delightful details about him, but in the category of what passes for useful information, however, we actually don't know very much. So perhaps, and in a way it's like, yeah, but it's still fun to know these details. He has only one work that has survived, and that is The Shepherd. It's a rather lengthy work belonging to the category of apocryphal apocalypses. The work consists of 3 large sections. The first is divided into 5 chapters called the Vision, the second and 12 chapters called the Mandates, and the third into 10 chapters known as the Parables. And the work is important for its ethical concepts and for its bearing on the sacrament of penance. Accepting the statement of anonymous author of the Muratorian fragment that the work was written at Rome by Hermes while his brother Pius was bishop, that would place the work between 140 and 155 AD. But there is a problem with that in that he also implies that Pope St. Clement I is still alive, and that would refer to Clement of Rome. But that's way too late for Clement to be alive. So this obvious difficulty is obviated by stating hypothetically that Hermes wrote some parts of the work much earlier and only bringing it to completion once his brother became pope. So even if we accept the usual later date of Clement's reign, which is usually spans 40 to 60 years for the writing, for this writing to be completed, or having taken the earlier date of Clement's reign, it would be even longer. However, the work is obviously much fictionalized according to Jurgens, and at any rate apocalyptic and visionary in genre. But there's no good reason why we can't suppose that he may have simply introduced the name Clement at any number of hidden or symbolic reasons, perhaps only by way of implying that the vision was one which came to him in his youth, or perhaps by way of semblance of antiquity of his work. Now this is very interesting. There's no single manuscript that preserves the entire original Greek of the Shepherd of Hermes, but by collating the various fragments of Greek text, except for a few sentences near the end, we can actually reconstruct the original. So it's not available in any one manuscript, but it is available in aggregate, which is kind of fascinating. Another thing, too, to realize is that the Shepherd of Hermes was included in some local churches and thought to be part of the New Testament. And this is very interesting because if you think about it, the New Testament canon had a problem in that, of course, you have the inspired apostles, but you also have the disciples of those apostles and companions who also wrote, like Mark and Luke. So when do you actually stop the New Testament canon was kind of a gray area in the early church, since the apostolic fathers knew the apostles John, knew the apostle Peter. Hermes claims to have known Clement of Rome, who was a disciple of St. Peter. There is apostolic contact going on there. And so some early church fathers actually included Hermes along with the books of the New Testament. But, these were only in certain locations. It was rather spotty, and Hermes just wasn't part of that original corpus of work coming out of the New Testament. And eventually, he gets sidetracked and then kind of falls into disuse when the canon was confirmed with the councils of Carthage and Hippo in the 4th century. But nevertheless, it's important work. It's a very early work. And like Jurgens noted, he does a lot of very interesting things to say about the church in regards to penance. And that's our early church father for today, the Shepherd of Hermes. Coming up next, Arthur and Theresa Beem, and we're going to be talking about the Seventh-day Adventist doctrine of sanctuary. Stay tuned.
In Luke 7, Jesus said, "I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven her, because she has been shown great love." According to St. John of the Cross, Christians should always remember that the value of their good works is not based on number and excellence. Their value is based on the love for God that prompts them to do the works. May we always be motivated by true love for God, and not worry so much about what we do, but why we do it.
Did you know my mom's gonna have a baby?
She is? Will it be a boy? Or will it be a girl?
We don't know yet, but we heard the heartbeat and my dad said this is gonna be someone very special.
You mean like being a president? Or maybe a doctor?
Well, probably maybe like a singer or dancer, I think.
Hello, my name is Marianne Koharski. I'm the director of Pro-Life Across America. We know that every baby is a miracle and has the potential to do great things. If you know someone who is pregnant or in need of alternatives or assistance, or would like to support the work of Pro-Life Across America, please call 1-800-366-7773 or visit our website at prolifeacrossamerica.org. Pro-Life Across America is non-political and totally educational.
Pro-Life Across America, the Billboard people.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for your support here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Here's an easy way to do it. If you're going to sell or buy a house, call Real Estate for Life, 877-543-3871, because they're going to get you a Christ-centered agent to purchase your home or to sell your home. And at the close of escrow, a portion of his commission goes right back to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Call 877-543-3871. Thank you so much for your support.
Now, back to Hands-on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2727. 2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands on Apologetics. And we're going to talk about doctrine within the Seventh-day Adventist, which teaches, it's called the sanctuary doctrine. And I don't want to get into details because I want our guests to. And that our guests are Arthur and Theresa Beem. As you know, they're friends of the program and also converts from Seventh-day Adventism. They are authors of It's Okay Not to Be a Seventh-day Adventist. Also, they produce some really great videos on YouTube. So check it out, folks. Just go in the search engine and type in Sunbeam, Sonbeem. And they have some great videos as an outreach to people who are still in the Seventh-day Adventist Church to try to understand what Catholicism is from the Catholic perspective, but in the language that they will understand. So, Arthur, Theresa, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Gary.
Thank you.
Master Machuda, nice to see you again. Thank you so much for having us back on. It's wonderful.
Oh, it's always a joy. I feel like we've known each other like all our lives, and
Yeah, we do
so
too.
it's good to check in with you. To see how you're doing. By the way, how are you doing?
We're doing great. We know you haven't been enjoying this COVID because you said last time that this is nothing for you, that you're used to living like this. So
Right.
you're kind of a hermit.
That's right. Yeah. Now you're down in Texas, right?
Well, no, actually we're not. We're in Virginia right now. My husband's a travel
Oh,
nurse,
okay.
and so we're just
Yeah, from Texas, but in Virginia at the moment.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. How are things in Virginia?
hot and
Humid,
muggy.
very humid. Very.
Very, very hot and muggy.
Yeah.
So, and
it's
how are you doing?
Yeah, same thing. But it's cooling off, so it's good,
Good.
and it seems like COVID's pretty much under control finally
Yeah.
in the state. So things are good, thank God.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, how could I segue? In the introduction,
tough.
I
It's a tough
mentioned
one.
that. Yeah, I mentioned that there's a sanctuary doctrine that actually a lot of Seventh-day Adventists aren't aware of, even though it's one of those major doctrines in their church.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the odd thing is it is you could say obscure, but it
Yeah.
isn't, because it's in their 29 fundamental beliefs that they have to sign at baptism.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's interesting that it's obscure, but it really isn't. They've seen it. Now how much they've gone through it, that's a whole nother thing, but they sign their name to it.
Yeah. Well, and it's very difficult to understand. So we're so dark. You talk,
Yeah,
and
I'll
okay.
go over here.
All right. Well, then I'll talk. We're just going to try to turn on the light. So do you want us just to jump right in and start explaining it, or?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Why don't you explain what it is? We can ask,
Okay.
how it
All right,
came about. And,
It's the Seventh-day Adventist doctrine is explained in doctrine number 8 and doctrine number 24, and there's 29 in all. And so but the main ones that you can look to and show that this really is one of their doctrines is Doctrine 8 and 24. And so I'm just going to let Arthur start. You tell him about the trial of God thing.
Right. Well, you're right. It's hard to segue into. So it really starts with the trial of God, which sounds crazy. It sounds very difficult to even say it, but God is on trial with this concept. He's on trial, and he's trying to prove to the universe that his laws, or the Ten Commandments, so when you hear them speak of his laws, they are speaking of the Ten Commandments.
Okay.
So it all started, very brief, is a third of the angels fell with Satan. They rebelled against God and against God's law. And 2/3 didn't fall. Okay. So this was what they consider the beginning of the Great Controversy, which is the title of one of their big books, between Christ and Satan. Okay. So really what you'll see is a courtroom scene, but it's kind of unusual because God is in the box being cross-examined. Okay. He's not the judge and he's not the jury. He's having to prove that his law is fair and good and right. Okay. So God's character needs to be acquitted.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
And so we, the universe, all of us are the judge and jury of God. And of course, Satan is the prosecuting attorney.
Right. And so this concept of the sanctuary is it's interwoven through all of what they believe. It's through the entirety of salvation history. It is about that's what it's all about, is trying to prove that God is right. Okay. So you would think that would be it, right? No, there's two parts to that. Okay. First part is,
well, no, it's to his defense.
To his defense.
Yeah, we got to make sure that's very clear.
So in his defense, there are two parts. It's not that just God says, I'm innocent or whatever. One part is the cross. Christ dying for our sins, right? But it's more than that to Adventists. His death was to save face of the Ten Commandments. Okay? Sin is the transgression of the law. Yes. So to stop sin, you had to vindicate the law.
Because the law tells you what sin is. And so you can't stop sin unless you know what sin is. And Satan said, oh, well, no, that can't be sin. Your law is unjust. So Christ coming and dying was the first part of God's defense to the universe. And he did this to show that his law is good.
And can be kept by us.
Yes, and we can keep God's law.
Yeah, which is God's law, remember, is the 10 Commandments. So, secondly, of the two defense properties you have is the sanctuary message. And that's what we were going to get into now, is the temple and the sanctuary message.
Right. So
let's do this.
Okay.
Explain that. It'll help as they follow through.
Yeah.
So you'll see.
Can you see this, by the way, Arthur? I'm sorry, honey. Okay, so this was our real fast last minute thing, but because this is so weird that you can't see it without can't understand without this visual. So so the first part of God's defense happened on earth. Right. But the second part of God's defense happens in the Holy of Holies, which is in the sanctuary in heaven. Okay, so they believe just exactly like there was a temple on earth, that there was mirrored the exact duplicate of a temple in heaven, so where God was. Well, okay, when the temple on earth was destroyed, now everything happens in the temple of heaven. So in the temple in heaven, there were two compartments. Now, most of your people will know what I'm talking about here. They've got the holy place that had the showbread and the
incense. Incense and the candles. Yeah.
Okay, and that the officiating priest could go in, daily. But then inside that was the Holy of Holies. So this was where the Ark of the Covenant was kept. And that's inside the Ark of the Covenant for the purpose of what Adventists believe. We'll just keep it. It was just the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments on the Ark. That's the important part. Mm-hmm. And Ellen White actually states in some of her writing that the whole reason that the Holy of Holies was sacred, it was not because the mercy seat was there. It was not because God's presence was there. It was because the 10 Commandments resided in the Holy of Holies.
Wow. Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so,
right.
Okay, so you transition to the...
Right. So transitioning, and I wanted to get that picture in your head, is the holy place and then the most holy place, because that's really important to understand as you're coming through the rest of this. So, all right. Through Bible study and a lot of prayer, the group of Ellen White and the people who believed like her believed that on October 22, 1844, God was that was his second coming. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they got this because in Daniel 8, it says that the the holy place is to be the great day of atonement, the greatest atonement of all, when the sanctuary is cleansed. Because, every single year in the Jewish temple, there was a cleansing of the temple of all the sins accumulated during the year on the great day of atonement, the Yom Kippur. So they believed that on the great Yom Kippur of 1844, the Bible was explaining this in Daniel, the great high day of holy day of atonement was going to be when Christ comes. That's what they misunderstood. That the great holy day of the great atonement day was when Christ was going to come. Well, they were wrong. See, that's the reason they picked October 22, 1844, for the day Christ was going to come. Okay.
Right. And so that's why it's so important to understand the whole temple doctrine part of it. So the great disappointment happened. What's the great disappointment? It didn't happen.
That's right.
So you had children freezing in the fields. They had given away all their goods. They were literally handing away land and all their belongings, earthly belongings, because they're going to heaven. So
yeah, because 50,000 people, at least 50,000 people stayed up all night, had given away everything on the east coast of America, and were waiting outside because they thought at the stroke of midnight, the great midnight cry is what they called it, the Lord would come. Well, he didn't.
Yeah. Now, this is part of the Millerite movement, right? William Miller's prediction.
Millerite.
That's right. That's right. Okay. So now is when you start to really dig into the Seventh-day Adventist through Ellen G. White right now, because this is when they start digging in, saying, where did we go wrong? Where in the world did we go wrong? What really happened on this day? So Hiram Edson was a Millerite. He brought forth this enlightened thought that what really happened was the moving from the holy place, the big one, into the little one here, right? Mm-hmm. So God the Father and God the Son now, who aren't in the most holy place, move from here into the most holy place. And so from there, Ellen White had her own vision supporting Hiram Edson's beliefs.
Right. So now they believed that the great day of atonement wasn't that God was going to come again, but that after the cross, from the time of the cross until 1844, God the Father and God the Son had been in this area. That when he went to the right hand of when God ascended to heaven, when Christ ascended to heaven, he sat at the right hand of God the Father in the holy place.
The holy place,
not the Holy of Holies.
Holy place.
So we got 18 centuries.
Okay. Yeah, let's hold it right there because I hear the music coming up. We're chatting with Arthur and Theresa Beem about the sanctuary doctrine, sanctuary message. More to come on the other side of the break. Listening on Apologetics.
Hi, this is Jesse Romero from the Terry and Jesse Show, also from Jesus 911. Let's face it, we all need to use the internet, but we need screen accountability. Why? Pornography is a huge problem, especially on the internet. And every time we tap into the internet, we get bombarded with images and temptations that degrade our humanity. So we need Covenant Eyes to block these pornographic sites and advertisements from infiltrating our lives. Covenant Eyes helps us take custody of our eyes and custody of our intellect. So I recommend you go to covenanteyes.com and type in the promo code VMPR to support the network. Protect yourself and your family from the imminent threats on the internet. www.covenanteyes.com, code VMPR, live porn free. Thank you for listening to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Thank you. God bless you. Keep the faith.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And here's an easy way to support us by going to smile.amazon.com and type in Catholic Resource Center or Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And when you log in your Amazon account and you purchase products, a portion of it will go right back in supporting Virgin Most Powerful Radio. And it doesn't cost you a dime. I want to thank you ahead of time because that supports us year-round. May God bless you and your family. Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands On Apologetics, and we are talking with Arthur and Theresa Beem about the sanctuary doctrine, which is really fascinating and complex, but they've done a great job. If you're just tuning in, check out the first segment. Basically, what they're talking about is this Millerite movement at the beginning of the early 1800s. William Miller predicted that Christ would come back eventually. The final date was October 22nd, 1844. When it came, there was the great disappointment. Christ didn't come. A lot of people left, but there were some who were convinced that the date was right and something happened on that day. And there was different opinions. Some claimed that Jesus came back invisibly. And with Seventh-day Adventists, they came up with the idea of the sanctuary doctrine, and we're correct me if I'm wrong. The Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in heaven moved from the holy place in the temple in heaven into the Holy of Holies. Is that correct?
Yeah, because this is the second. God's on trial, and he's got two defenses. One already happened on earth. When Christ died, he went and met his Father in the holy place. Okay, now, all the sins of the world were accumulating in the most holy place because we're waiting for the great day of atonement so they can get rid of all the sins. So in 1844, this is the second part happened, and now we go from the earth to the sanctuary in heaven. And Christ and the Father get up in 1844, and they move into the Holy of Holies. They shut the door, they pull the curtain, the veil together. So now, because that had been open according to their beliefs, and the Holy of Holies had been shut up. But just to make this point, what is the implication of 1800 years, 18 centuries of God being outside of the Holy of Holies? See, we would say wherever God is the Holy of Holies. But they believe that where the Ten Commandments sat was the Holy of Holies. That was where, and the reason being is God had voluntarily said, I'm going to submit myself to my own laws. That God keeps the Ten Commandments. And it is an eternal, it's the eternal law of God forever and ever and ever. And so at this point, 1844, they walk into the Holy of Holies. And when they did this, they opened up the door. So now the Ten Commandments could shine out. You see, all the reformers, everything that had happened up until this point, there had been a veil covering everyone's face so they couldn't see what was really going on. And now, boom, the doors to the Holy of Holies were open, and God and the Father and God the Son walked in, and they started cleansing the sanctuary of the sins. But while this happened, Ellen White says in her vision, she was there when this happened, and you could see the Ten Commandments They were right there. It was somehow opened up where you could see, and there was a halo, a golden halo around what the Catholics would call the third commandment, but for Protestants and Adventists, it's the fourth commandment. It's the Sabbath commandment. And that, she says, is the heart of the 10 commandments. That is the part of the commandments that had been obscured for 1,800 years while they were in the holy place. So once the Holy Holies was opened up in 1844, everyone now can see that the Sabbath is what has been obscured from all the reformers, the Sabbath truth. So God has given the Seventh-day Adventist Church the reins of the apocalyptic horses, the three angels' message. They must go tell the world that the final test of God is about this Sabbath. And it is going to be the final test to see if you're a Christian, because the 10 Commandments are what everything in the universe revolves around.
That's what it's all about.
It's the whole trial again. This is the second part of God's defense, is coming from this most holy place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so.
Yeah, wow. That's very well put, too. That's not easy to, there's so many different components. It's not easy to put it all together, is it?
Yes. And so you can cleanse the sanctuary through God now in there. He's cleansing the sanctuary, and his blood has been sitting there this whole time. No sins have been forgiven. Everybody's sin,
wow,
even if it was forgiven, is still sitting in there. And God now is starting the process of forgiving the sins. And that's what's called the investigative judgment.
Right. So this is another interesting point about this. In the investigative judgment, he begins judging. This is something that terrified us as kids growing up in Adventism. Now, a lot of Adventists would hear us and say, well, they don't teach that anymore. It's still there, and it's still part of their 29 fundamental beliefs, like I said, that you sign. I believe in this. So that is still the core of the church. Whether they remember it or not, it's still there. And it was terrifying.
Well, and remember, it's just the believers.
Right.
She said that, like the Bible says, the judgment starts with the house of God. And so the judgment of the wicked is going to come later. These are just believers that are being judged. Okay, go ahead.
So here's a quote just to help you understand. It says, every man's work passes in view before God and is registered for faithfulness or unfaithfulness. Opposite each man's name in the books of heaven is entered the terrible exactness, every word, every wrong word, every selfish act, every unfulfilled duty, and every secret sin, and so on.
I mean, this is a judgment of everything you've thought, the motivation of your heart, with exactness. The world stops, and now God is looking at all of your sins, even the ones that have been forgiven. They're still standing there to judge you. But then Christ comes up to the Father and says, I covered this sin.
Right.
And if you didn't have a sin covered, then you're not going to get to go to heaven.
Okay.
So as children, this is terrifying. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what determines whether or not your sin is covered? Is it keeping of the Sabbath?
Well, no. But what they believed, now Adventists have a whole different set of rules. Smoking, drinking, all these things that are sins. No pork, that's right. And so God is looking at everything you've ever done. And if you have eaten pork, or you've smoked or drank or whatever, so then if you've asked forgiveness, then you're forgiven. But if you did something and you did not ask for forgiveness, then you wouldn't make it. I mean, it has to actually have, written on there, this is a forgiven sin, and Christ covered it. But if there's even one sin that you did not ask forgiveness for, and then what was really weird is growing up, and this is part of it, is once God was done with judging all those believers that are dead, that right before Christ comes again, there's no one left but the living believers. That's the only people left. And he's going to start judging the living believers before they die.
And this is the terrifying part right
And
here.
at any moment, you're sitting there watching television. If you're a believer, your name could be coming up before the heavens for judgment, and you wouldn't know it. And that moment, whatever you're doing at that moment, if it's a sin, if you haven't asked for forgiveness, that's it. So,
and it could be anything, like we said, smoking, drinking, eating unclean meats, eating meat at all, really, dancing or whatever. You never know. It's like a theological rapture, kind of. It would be a way to put it.
Because any moment.
So if this judgment happens in heaven and you're still alive, now do you continue afterwards, or is this at the end of time?
Oh yeah, it was the end of time, but we don't know when there could be millions of names after yours. So God is not going to come till everyone is judged. So you could be literally riding in your car and you're being judged, and you're going to heaven or hell at that point.
There's no going back. Once you're judged, and that's that.
Yeah, and after that, you do not have a mediator in Christ. He cannot mediate any more of your sins. So you have to be perfect after that. And but one of the things was the theater. Do you remember that story about when?
Yeah, they would tell us in grade school. They said, you really don't want to be in a theater, especially being in watching any movie. We're talking Disney or whatever, because your guardian angel would not go in there with you. He would stay outside, and they said weeping.
Yeah, that's right.
They actually said that guardian angel will not go in the theater with you, and he'll stay outside weeping until you come out.
And at that moment, your name could come up, and you'd be in a theater.
So it's terrifying as a little kid. You're just like, oh no, what other things do I not know that I'll get judged for? It's pretty scary because I don't see an exhaustive list. You just
Well, and I remember we were singing The Love Bug. And I remember as a kid thinking, what if my name comes up right now?
Yeah.
So anyway.
I remember Love Bug.
Yeah.
Yeah, just this little sweet Disney movie that, nothing wrong with it, but boy, that was a sin. It really, honestly, I mean, that was mortal sins for Adventists. And if you were to commit adultery or lie, that breaking the Sabbath and eating, I mean, quite literally, I mean, we're being serious. If you slept with somebody, got pregnant and had an abortion, that was way less.
Culturally, it was definitely way less than if you smoked or didn't go to church on Saturday.
Yeah. And so then those that don't make it, they don't believe in hell. They believe in annihilation. So it's not like you're going to be punished. If you do something wrong, if you don't make it to heaven, you're just going to be as if you never were. No, people in heaven will just never remember that you were ever existed. Your life is just going to be erased. So you don't have any punishment. You just don't get any reward. So they think they believe that's a very merciful God, that there's no hell.
Right.
So, okay. Now
we only have like 30 seconds, so maybe this is a good point to pause. Fascinating stuff. We're talking with Arthur and Theresa Beem. Check it out, Sunbeam on YouTube, and also check out their books on Amazon. We'll be right back. We're going to continue our discussion right after this. Stay tuned, folks.
Help the Helpless, a Minnesota St. Paul nonprofit organization chaired by Father of Tear and volunteers, is humbly asking you for your kind support to help the poor and the handicapped children in India and Ecuador. Through financial support from the Help of the Helpless benefactors, the children are provided with clothing, food, education, shelter, and the teachings of the Catholic Church. The mission is to help children thrive and become self-sufficient young adults leading productive lives. We also provide aid to poor families in Ecuador with food baskets, medicines, medical assistance, and help with funeral needs for the deceased. The work in India is done by Father Antonio's organization, St. Mary's. In Ecuador, the work is being done by the Servant Sisters of the Home of Mother. You can call us at 877-762-8857. To learn more, please visit our website, www.helpthehelpless.org. God bless you. Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody. Hands-On Apologetics. We're chatting with Arthur and Theresa Beem. And check out their podcast on YouTube at Sunbeam, Sonbeem. And great stuff. And fascinating discussion about the Seventh-day Adventist doctrine of the sanctuary, sanctuary message, sanctuary doctrine. So, if I could start with a question. So, Seventh-day Adventists don't make any distinction between venial and mortal sins. Every sin is considered mortal, and therefore,
right,
caught.
But there
technically speaking, like talking to a Catholic, that would be correct.
Yeah, but they also consider some sins the more dangerous sins.
Yeah, not keeping the Sabbath is the most dangerous.
Right.
So
yeah, very good. Now, so you were mentioning that investigative judgment and that they deny the existence of hell. They believe that you're annihilated. You're just going to make another point when the music came up. Why don't we pick it up from there?
Sure. Well, the culmination of God's defense is that he comes again, and the universe understands then that his eternal laws are just. They judge him and say, it is forever. You are good. You are just. Therefore,
those two
you're
things.
Off the hook, I guess.
He had the earthly defense and the heavenly defense, and now supposedly the world looks at this and says, okay, God's law is just. So that was really the whole salvation plan, was to save God's face and his law. And now supposedly because of these two things, now his law has been justified, and thus he has been justified.
And through that, he submitted himself to the universe for judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And he's good. He's fair.
Okay, and that's the sped up version. If you actually want to read, I don't know if you can see this or not, but it's my book, and I go into a lot more depth into this idea of.
It's okay not to be a Seventh-day Adventist.
The expanded, clear version is really, really well done, and it helps. We've had even Baptists and different people say it's really helped them learn how to communicate with them, how to have discussions with them. So,
yeah, very good. Yeah, I highly recommend it. I learned a lot from it, and of course, I learn a lot every time you're on the show. So this has powerful implications, doesn't it, as far as Christ and whether God is? I'll let you pull those out. I mean, there's several.
But one other thing, I'm glad we have a little just extra time, because we fast forwarded that so fast, just to make sure we had a chance to say the very end of the atonement in the temple was when the high priest took the two goats. There was the the goat that they at the Day of Atonement that they sacrificed, and then there was the goat that the high priest put his hands on, transferred all the sins that had accumulated that year, and then they set the goat free in the wilderness to go. I think it was called Azazel. Is that correct? Do you remember that?
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, most people believe. Well, I mean, I don't even know what most people believe. I'm not going to even say that. But Adventists believe that the goat that goes out into the wilderness, the scapegoat, is Satan, and so that finally, all the sins that have accumulated for all time since Adam in the Holy of Holies in heaven, when it's cleansed, they're all put on the head of Satan, and he leaves carrying all the sins. The cross itself did nothing but delay the cleansing of sin. They didn't disappear. They were put back on Satan, and he carried them away. Yeah. So most Adventists do not know this. This is absolutely factual. You can look it up in Ellen White's prophecy. She said this is from God himself. She said this was given to her in a vision by an angel from God. And that is one of the most heretical. I believe that if mainstream Christianity realized that Adventists believe this, there would be no way they could be considered mainstream Christians. I mean, don't you think?
I think that's how they've gotten the people who have read them that are researchers. That's why they get on the lists of, hey, this is, I don't want to call them not Christians, because I have a lot of family that are loving, wonderful. I think they don't know this.
Yeah, most of them don't know. Yeah. They silence this part.
Yeah, because they I don't want to say, it's kind of like, if you remember in The Wizard of Oz, the guy behind the curtain,
Right.
It's a little bit like that. It's there, and they see something else, because it's funny, they'll deny a lot of these things of Ellen White, but they've signed their name to it at baptism, but They never go back and actually read, really, what am I signing my name to?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no way that this doesn't prove that she's a false prophetess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, there's probably good reason why it's not well known. Because
yeah.
Right.
You wouldn't sign your name to that.
Yeah.
Right. Plus, the problem you would have in defending that, I think that's why you don't see them in debates and discussions. They don't have discussions with people. They won't, unless they have total control of the situation. They won't talk about it, and it's kind of a shame in that they put the fear in the parishioners of you're going to be confused, and you'll be pulled away from God himself if you listen to anything else. So that's why you don't see them really being very endearing or brotherly love amongst Christians. They're smiley and they're kind, and they have all these hospitals, but when it comes down to actually talking doctrine and reasoning together like the Bible tells us to do, they won't do that unless they have total control of it.
Well, I'm curious, did we make the doctrine understandable? I mean, is there anything that we messed up? Oh, good.
No,
good.
Actually, I think that's one of the best presentations I've ever encountered. Because, like you said, there's so many different facets to it. It's hard to put it all together. So I'm just thinking, if someone is joining Seventh-day Adventism and they're given these beliefs to sign off on, would they even know to look into it? You know what I mean? Because it's so obscure, and so it would be very easy for someone to say, oh, it just means such and such, I mean, and just give a broad overview where it covers over a lot of the really startling implications.
Yes. That God is subject to his own law, that God forever, see, the Ten Commandments is going to be the law of God forever. And see, they believe that this gospel that came out, when they moved from the holy into the Holy of Holies, there was a new gospel given to the Adventist church. It's called the eternal gospel. And so now,
if the first gospel was not eternal.
Yeah, no, exactly. But it's the 10 commandments that are the eternal gospel.
Now, I want to say this one thing. they don't recognize the new covenant as we do. They say the new covenant is simply that it's written on our hearts.
The Ten Commandments.
Yeah, the 10 Commandments is written on our hearts and not on stone anymore. Now it's on our hearts. They think that's what the new covenant is. So they don't believe in the whole thing where Christ says, hey, it's not just this. Now it's everything. This is, you give everything. They don't.
Well, and
they don't
there's
follow
nothing
that.
There's nothing about faith or mercy in the Ten Commandments. Not to say that the Ten Commandments, I mean, yes, the Ten Commandments are good, but Christ made them better. And he said, now you have to love your enemy. See, that's not in the Ten Commandments. You have to have mercy. You show mercy or you won't receive mercy. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot missing that means nothing to them. That's not, God's just giving us pastoral, Christ is just giving some pastoral ideas in the new covenant.
Wow.
So,
that's what I would say in reaching out and having discussions with them. That's the difficult thing, because they have passages memorized like the Baptists would, and they can fire some message at you. But as far as talking about the theological implications of them, or where it came from, or where did the Bible come from, they won't have that discussion.
Yeah,
they just won't.
Yeah,
they can't. They don't have anything to talk about really when it comes down to it.
Yeah. So how would you approach something like this? Would you ask them to explain, one of the beliefs that, or those two beliefs that they signed on to, and how could you kind of open the door to get them to realize the implications of these teachings?
Well, first you'd have to tell them what they are, and then you could do that. But it's really, really difficult. And what I have found that you first have to explain that Ellen White wasn't a true prophet, because the Catholics believe in the authority, the apostolic succession. They have a visual. They have something they can see. Well, Adventists have Ellen White. Her writings were given to her. It was a direct revelation by God. And so it would be the exact same thing as to get to a Catholic, you'd have to destroy apostolic succession. You'd have to hit at the heart of authority. Well, with the Adventists, you're going to have to do the same thing. But the problem is there are a lot of Adventists out there that don't believe in Ellen White. And the only reason they're Adventists is because they want to go to church on Saturday, because they've been told the 10 Commandments are the eternal law of God. And that makes it hard, because they are an eternal law of God. Yeah. It's just not in the way that Adventists believe. That's not the be-all and end-all of the salvation history. So it's really hard to break that.
Well, break the fear. Mm-hmm. So they'll just have an open, heartfelt conversation and be able to go through the 29 fundamental beliefs and say, well, this one, where did this come from? Show me in the Bible. Well, it didn't come from the Bible. It came from Ellen White. And so it's like they don't want to get into that conversation. But even if they did want to get into the conversation, they don't know that it exists, a lot of them, after they sign the document.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're a tough one.
Yeah, absolutely. And, boy, I could probably go on for a couple more hours with you. This is all fascinating, but we're coming up to the end of the program, and I want to talk a little bit about what you're doing on YouTube and your books. We have like a minute or so. You want to mention what you've been up to?
Well, we've been doing YouTube videos trying to explain Catholicism to Adventists, because they have a lot of misunderstanding. A lot of the words are the same words, but they have different meanings. Right. And so you've got to, get through that.
It's called What Adventists.
I think you're cut off. But anyway, thank you so much for coming on. Folks, check it out. Oh, you're welcome. Sunbeam on YouTube. Also, go to Amazon, pick up It's Okay Not to Be a Seventh-day Adventist. Thank you for coming. Coming up next, Terry and Jesse Show. Stay tuned.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.